Hey everyone, minasama konnichiwa, boku no channel yo yokoso. Today I'd like to talk about one of my favorite movies. It's 1941 from 1979 by Steven Spielberg. I clearly remember my first encounter with this movie when I was maybe around 10 or 11 years old. We came upon this movie while scrolling through the shelves of our local video store. It was a Spielberg movie that none of us had heard of before, so we decided to get it. It opens with a scene that greatly resembled the opening of Jaws, so I guess we were a little confused right off the bat. But then a submarine came out of the water instead of a shark, and there we were, looking at a naked woman straddling this giant pole. Maybe that moment was too awkward for me and my sister and my dad to handle, or maybe we just thought it was too stupid for us to watch. Whatever it was, we turned it off before the scene even ended, and I never really thought about it very much after that. Coming right after the rousing successes of Jaws and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and coming right before the rousing successes of Raiders of the Lost Ark and E.T., 1941 was certainly a huge outlier in his career at that time. A movie that was much more expensive than any of those other four movies, yet made much less money than any of them. But more importantly, it's a big, irreverent period piece comedy that basically plays like a loud cartoon from beginning to end. Well, I finally buckled up and watched the whole 2.5 hour extended cut a couple of years ago, and while we weren't wrong when I was a kid to call this movie stupid, it's almost an admirable kind of stupid, where Spielberg took the money and let it all hang out, almost regardless of what's good or bad and what anyone would say. And there's a lot of good and bad in 1941, but the interesting thing is that in this case you almost can't have one without the other. Generally, what I mean by that is that while a great amount of the jokes and or humor simply isn't very funny, there's so much attempt at humor crammed wall to wall and so many comic characters and situations that the movie creates a rich comic vision, devoid of any hint of seriousness, that I always love in comedies. For example, out of nowhere, Eddie Deason randomly produces a puppet. Why does he have a puppet with him? Why does he take it out? Who cares? It's just amusing. He hardly says anything in the whole movie, and when he does, what he says isn't particularly funny, but it's a fact that he's there at all that's funny. Stupid, of course, but it just adds to the comic environment. The same can be said of when Dan Aykroyd gets hit on the head with a giant Santa Claus model. When he comes to, he basically becomes nuts, saying random stuff and putting lemons on his head. Is it funny? Not really, but it's just another comic layer on top of the already crazy situation. Now, there are many really bad comedies that have this kind of style of just throwing many things at the wall, hoping something sticks. But one of the things that distinguishes this movie from the rest is that this anything goes humor parallels with the madness of the physical comedy and the huge scope of the movie. Like I said before, this cost way more than Spielberg's other movies around that time, and it shows in all the huge sets, model work, and large number of extras, as well as the copious amount of explosions and destruction used in a way that a child might imagine destroying a model city or something. The highlight of this destruction might be the Ferris wheel that rolls on the pier and into the water. This is, of course, all model work, but I think it looks really convincing, even today. It's still a dumb movie, but unlike other dumb movies, this is an ambitious, exhilarating one. All this wild destruction matches perfectly with Spielberg's direction. It's a long movie, but he keeps the gags moving very fast, and one can get the sense that Spielberg was in a more anarchic mindset when he made this. One particularly memorable scene that showcases all his talents is the big ballroom scene, which starts as a musical number, during which one character hunts down another amidst all the chaos, and ends with a big brawl between the Navy and Marines. The camera movements, choreography, and mise en scène are so lively and energetic that the first time I saw the scene, it blew me away. I think it surpasses anything in Spielberg's actual musical, his West Side Story remake. Another thing that gives this movie interest is the context of the story. This is about the panic that America, specifically California, felt after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. The panic that maybe something similar could happen to the mainland. I know I'm not a history person, so it was fascinating to discover that as crazy as the events in this movie seem, some of it was actually based on true events. For one, the movie follows a Japanese submarine as it tries to destroy Hollywood, and while that last part isn't true, there actually were Japanese subs patrolling California in early 1942, and they actually engaged in fights and destroyed ships. They also did attack and damage an oil refinery in Santa Barbara, so the scenario in the movie might not be so crazy after all. The other crazy event in the movie is all the shooting that happened in the sky of LA because they thought a Japanese aerial invasion was happening, which actually happened in real life. The shooting, not the invasion. One big difference out of, I'm sure, many others was that in real life it was apparently just a weather balloon that they thought was the invaders, and in the movie it was an actual plane with Tim Matheson and Nancy Allen getting it on inside. Learning about that, I'm sure, little known history makes the movie more fascinating because it taught me something interesting I had no idea about. I also love the huge cast, which includes Dan Aykroyd, John Candy, Ned Beatty, Ellen Brody, Lauren Gray, Slim Pickens, Murray Hamilton, Robert Stack, Nancy Allen, Christopher Lee, Toshiro Mifune, and even very small roles by Elijah Cook Jr. and Sam Fuller. And of course, John Belushi is memorably crazy as always, as Captain Wild Bill Kelso. But now on to my favorite moments. The first is about another great cast member I didn't mention, Warren Oates. Like many other characters, he never really says anything particularly funny, but I can't get over his physical appearance. With this mustache and big glasses, he literally looks like something lifted right out of a cartoon. And I love seeing Warren Oates in anything, so I really appreciated him here. This isn't a moment per se, but he's only in a couple scenes and it leaves a memorable impression. I also love where Robert Stack, playing a major general, takes a break from the action to see Dumbo in theaters. Even with the chaos happening all around him, he's so emotionally invested in watching the movie that pure joy radiates from his face as he sings along, and pure sadness as he cries during the baby mine scene. Also, the way that Spielberg shoots inside the movie theater is just beautiful, which leaves no doubt that while there's an undeniable element of humor here, this was meant above all to be a tribute to the power of movies. And finally, there's a sequence where a house right on the water is given a huge gun to use for defense, and when they see the Japanese submarine, they fire at it, and in the meantime basically destroy their house. I think this is one of the funnier gags in the movie, but the best part doesn't come until the very end. In celebration of the unity of the country and in the spirit of Christmas, Ned Beatty decides to nail a wreath to his door, but when he does, what's left of the house unbelievably slides off its base and gets completely demolished. It's a good, expensive gag that's a perfect way to end the movie. But in the end, what I love about 1941 is that while it's true that a lot of the movie isn't actually very funny, it's more about creating a comic vision about a specific period of paranoia in history, one that I don't think I've seen portrayed before. Even though the movie is nowhere near perfect, and certainly not for all tastes, it's an epic mess that still manages to display Spielberg's undeniable talent in what's little more than a big, dumb farce. It's one of my 1000 favorite movies. Thanks for watching my video. Goshoujo makoto ni arigatou gozaimasu. Have you seen 1941? Let me know what you think in the comments. I think of all my favorite movies as my friends, and I think of my audience as friends too.